Hey everybody, this is Jim the Tabletop Engineer, and welcome to a new Paint a Mini video. Once again, I'm going to be painting two minis identically, and just so you know, these miniatures are for a game called Cthulhu Death May Die. It's from CMON or CMON. I don't know how they pronounce their company name, but it's a Cthulhu mythos game, and these are the I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. The Byakhee. Byakhee. I don't think anyone truly knows how Lovecraft meant to pronounce some of the creatures, but I've got two of them, and I need to paint them. And what I've been doing is I've been painting the miniatures based on these cards. This is the Byakhee right here. And last video I painted the fire vampires. So these are pretty straightforward. They're just sort of a dark brown, maybe a light brown. So I'm going to use this speed paint called Sand Golem. And they do have red eyes, so I will make sure to put a little drops of red in there once the paint dries. So normally, or as normal with these videos, as I paint, I'm going to point the camera down, and I'm just going to talk about whatever's on my mind. And today what I'm going to be talking about is a question I got from a reader of my zine called Delver. Now, if you're not familiar with it, I put out an OSR, old school Renaissance, old school rules, whatever you want to call it, OSR zine about 6 times a month. This year, 2022, I put out 6 zines called Delver. Now I put out a lot more than that. I did a zine for Mothership called Airlock. I did 4 zines called The Lost Tomes, which are just more OSR gaming stuff. What else did I do? I did a couple others. I did one called Guild, another one called Tavern. But anyway, I put out quite a few zines this year, and this person emailed me, although I've had variations of this question. So I thought, you know what, I'll address it this one, or I'll try to address it. And the real question was this. The person emailed me and asked me for my advice on self-publishing his own zine. And he just said, hey, I noticed you published a lot of zines, and I have some ideas, and I'd like to do it, and I'd like to know what's involved. Now, other people have asked similar questions. Like one person asked me how I do what's called fulfillment, which is like getting the zines in the buyer's hands. I've had questions related to like how do I do it? How do I write a zine? Where do you get started and things like that? So I'm going to go ahead and grab some paintbrushes. And I'm just going to randomly chat to you about, I'm using a big brush because pretty much it's all the same color. I'm going to talk to you about that. And hopefully maybe some of you who maybe didn't even know you wanted to make a zine, maybe this will give you some inspiration to create it. I love zines. I think they have a great place in the gaming community, whether it's RPGs or war games or what have you. And the reason I like them is they're self-published. They're from fans of the game. They're typically from fans of the game. Now, there is a zine called Carcass Crawler that is actually produced and written by the creator of Old School Essentials, which is one of the games I like to play, Gavin. And so that is sort of an official zine. But most zines are not official, okay? You're either writing a very generic zine or you need to include some sort of license. The games that allow for people to produce their own content and sell it, if it's allowed, they'll usually provide some sort of license, right? And Old School Essentials, which is sort of my go-to game for old OSR games, it does have a license. So you're allowed to create content for that game and sell it. So the first thing I would tell you is if you want to create a zine, let's just make the assumption. Let's just go on that. Let's make the assumption right now that you want to do a zine. All right. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that it's going to be legal. Now, if you're just doing a generic zine or maybe making your own game, you don't have to have any permission for that. If it's original content and it's not based on any existing property, go for it. You'll find a lot of zines out there of people who write their own RPGs or their own little war games and things like that. And if it's your stuff and it's not stolen from anybody, Go knock yourself out. You don't need a license for that. But if you do need a license, typically the rules will state that you need to include that license somewhere in your zine. And for me, what I do is I typically include it in one of the, towards the back of the magazine. That's what a lot of zine creators do. So you'll want to check into that. So let's make the assumption now that you want to create a zine and it's going to require a license or not. But you do want to create a zine. So where do you go from there? Well, okay, I'm making a lot of assumptions here. I'm assuming that you have sort of defined what you want to do. Are you writing a zine for an RPG, for a war game, for something else? Is it going to be a standalone zine? Is it going to be something you want to release sort of semi-regularly? Is it... what's its length going to be? Do you foresee this being a substantial length zine? And the reason I ask that is because most zine buyers, they're not looking for 300-page zines. I mean, maybe some are, but zines are traditionally small, handmade. In the old days, in the 70s and 80s, zines were like hand published. They were hand cranked, hand photocopied, hand stapled, hand folded, hand everything. But today, you don't have to do that. Now, you can call your zine a zine. There's some people out there that say, well, if you're not printing it yourself and doing all the layout, if you're not doing everything yourself, it's not a zine. I've heard very few people say that. But I have read some comments from people online that say, well, what you're really doing is just producing a supplement. Okay, supplement, zine, whatever. The thing is you're going to want to sort of define your the length or what you're attempting to do. My zines typically fall between 32 and 60 pages. Now, this is a little bit of a bit of advice. You want to make sure that when you're doing your zine, especially if you're folding it, right, and you're going to do like what they call a traditional 5.5 by 8.5. If you take an 8.5 by 11 standard size sheet of American paper and you fold it in half, that's folded in half on the long side. That's what a zine traditionally size is. It's 5.5 wide and 8.5 tall. All right, you don't have to do that. I have plenty of zines in my collection that do not fit that that size. Okay, so that's not written in stone. It's not some law that says if you want to call your zine a zine, it's got to be 5.5 by 8.5. It's just that's what you typically find most people doing. You're also, if you're going to print it yourself, like take it to a copy place like Kinko's or something and photocopy it, obviously you want to make it with a paper that's not going to be super expensive. And like here in the United States, an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper is pretty standard for photocopiers. And so if you fold it in half, that's how you get the 5.5 by 8.5 size. But choose your size that you want to do, and just keep in mind that costs, not just printing costs, paper costs, but shipping costs. If you have a large zine and you're going to ship it, it's going to cost a little more than a lighter, thinner zine. Okay, so these are all things you just need to consider. Now, I'll get to the writing part in a minute, but let's talk about the printing part. Now, I mentioned you can take it to a photocopy place and you can photocopy it yourself, and I've done that. I did a zine a few years ago called Tavern Tales where I just wanted to emulate the early 80s or zine creators, and so I printed it out on a computer printer. I took it to the photocopier. I photocopied all the pages. I hand folded them, hand stapled them. And then after I went through all that, I had this zine that I felt was sort of, it was a nod to those who'd done it before. And then I said, I'm never going to do that again. It was a lot of work. And I mean, it was fulfilling, and I did it. And I can now say, yeah, I did it the old school way, but I don't want to do that again. So do it that way if you want. But if you prefer, you can go with a traditional printing company that can probably do it much cheaper than you can if you're buying in bulk. Now, I use a printer right now. I say right now because anything can change. They've taken very good care of me with some mistakes on their end, so I'm pretty happy with them. But I use a company called Mixam, M-I-X-A-M. A lot of zine creators are using Mixam. I don't know where they're based out of, but you do it all online. You go online, you choose the number of copies you want, you choose the number of pages, you choose things like the quality of the cover, like whether it's got a matte finish or a gloss finish, and all these things affect prices. All right. They have this new thing that's it's like a soft suede cover, which is very popular. But everything you do is going to add a little bit of cost to the per issue. You specify how many issues you want printed, and of course, the more you choose to print, the better price you're going to get. Bulk pricing is the name of the game. So I traditionally, with my Kickstarters that I've done for my zines, I'm usually printing between 300 and 500 copies of my zine. I always order about 10 to 20% extra, and that's for like lost issues in the mail, damaged issues. I've had a few people, say that their issue arrived, wet, like it was dropped in water or what have you. I send through the U.S. Postal Service, which, depending on your opinion, that could be a good or bad thing. If you send zines through like UPS or FedEx or something like that, you're talking major money, okay? You're going to save money by using the U.S. Postal Service if you're in the U.S. The downside is, the U.S. Postal Service does not guarantee delivery dates, kind of like the other ones do. But for zines, most buyers of a $10, $20 zine, they're not, I don't think I can't speak for all of them, but the ones I've spoken to, they're not expecting to receive their zine in like 3 days or, whatever, like the speed that UPS or FedEx can deliver. But obviously you want to get it to them in a reasonable time. But the other reason I recommend the U.S. Postal Service is they have an option called Media Mail, MEDIA, Media Mail. I don't use Media Mail. I use first-class postage, mainly because when I send my stuff out, I want it to get there in a reasonable time. But if you use Media Mail, you are allowed to send magazines and books only. You can't send flyers. You can't. I don't think you can send flyers. You can't send like catalogs, or maybe you can. There are rules about Media Mail, but Media Mail will save you a ton of money. It's usually about half the price per unit shipped of a first class send. So if I spend $4 to send a first class zine, it's usually about $2 to send it Media Mail. That is not what I meant to use. That is a speed paint. I just mention it because I have used it once before, but I will never use it again. I won't say never. I try not to use it because it is slow. All right, Media Mail is sort of like, as I understand it, the post office is sort of like, we'll get it there when we get it there. Now, granted, it's not going to be months, but it could be weeks, and I'm saying that based on experience. So just be aware that Media Mail is not fast, all right? But it is an option, and if you're just starting out and you don't have a large fan base that you kind of can calculate your costs and stuff, it is an option to consider. Because it will save you money. But you definitely need to let people know, whether you're kickstarting or just selling it off of a website. You need to let them know that you're using Media Mail, and maybe mention that, Media Mail is a little slower, but it will get to you. But like I said, I use first class, so within the United States, I can usually get backers or people who buy my zines, I can usually get them their zine in about 4 to 5 business days, anywhere in the U.S. I'm in Atlanta, and I know I've got fans in California who have told me that they received it, and I even can track it. I print labels and I have tracking, so I can look and see when something arrives. And I traditionally get about 4 to 5 days for first class mail in the U.S. So the last business item I would want to discuss is, I mentioned shipping costs, but there's the medium of shipping. I use, for my 5.5 by 8.5 zines, I buy mailers. I buy them in bulk. They're like an envelope. They're not padded, Sorry, I've got a lawn crew out back. I hope y'all can't hear that. I use these mailers. They're 9 inches by 7 inches, and they'll hold about 2 to 3 zines. Past that, I'll use a different size envelope, a 12 by 10. But you'll want to factor that cost into your price. And I tell you this because you do not want to be sending your zines in a soft padded envelope where the postman or somebody along the way might fold it, or it might get stuck between 2 boxes and creased or bent. Because zine buyers, when they get their zine, they want it to be in good condition. They want to read it. A lot of them are collectors. They want to put it in a bag or put it on the shelf and reference it when they can. So you want to make sure you're taking good care of their the packages that they're buying from you. All right, so wow, that went quicker than I thought. I really got both of these guys painted pretty fast. I mean, they're all one color. Now I've got to do the eyes, so I'm going to wait for the eyes to dry, and then I'm going to put a dot of white in there, and then when that dries, I'll put a dot of red just to give them something a little extra. But based on the picture, they're all the same color. Now, the picture shows a dark tan brown. Mine look more orange in nature, but that's okay. They're consistent, and I don't hold that they have to be exactly the same color. All right. So, you're doing a zine. You know about shipping. You know how to ship it. You want to try and protect it. You know about the shipping costs, first class versus, say, media mail. You know about the printers. And I'm doing this very quickly. I could spend a lot of time on each one of these subjects. But we talked about printing, and I use Mixam, but there are other print companies out there like Mixam that will print up your zine and they will ship it to you. Now, when I get the shipments from Mixam, they usually come in boxes of about 100 per box. They usually, Mixam usually, not all the time, bundles them in packs of 10 with a rubber band, and then they shrink wrap the 10, okay? If the zine is thinner than like 40 or so pages, you might get bundles of 20 with a rubber band and then shrink wrapped. And then you may get 200 in the box. It just depends on what you're ordering. But I traditionally, when I order my zines, I know that for every 100 copies I order, I'm going to get 1 box from Mixam. So when they show up and I know that I ordered 500, if I see 4 boxes, it makes me nervous. It's happened. And in one instance, a box arrived like the next day. I don't know. You'd think they'd keep them together, but whatever. But understand, you need to also know the refund policy and how the customer service is, because I don't have a copy here to show you. I did order a zine, Delver number 5. The boxes showed up. I opened them, and immediately I knew it was bad. They had taken the cover, which there's an outside cover front, outside cover back, and then there's an inside front cover and an inside back cover. They had folded the cover wrong and stapled it, and so now the insides of my covers were on the outside. I had like 450 copies that I could not send to backers, Kickstarter backers, because that was unacceptable. Thankfully, Mixam took care of the problem. They expedited it and got me the reprints in like a week. And what I was able to do, because the cost of shipping 2 zines was about identical to shipping 1 zine. It was a 10-cent difference or something, maybe 20 cents. But I ate the cost, and what I did was I sent all my Kickstarters the good copy, and I sent them a bad copy that might be worth $1 in about 20 or 30 years as a collector's item. I don't know. So just beware when you're dealing with a printer. You want to deal with a reputable printer, someone that you can trust. I've been told to deal locally, and I have gone and priced here in Atlanta from some printers who print zine quality stuff, and they can't come close to what these companies like Mixam can do. Mixam just does it in bulk, and therefore they can save you money. So, all right. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap this up, mainly because I don't know if you can hear it. I've got a yard crew guy back in the back there. I think maybe in a future video, I will talk about the writing process, like writing a zine. I'm sorry, I don't want to sit here and just be a talking head. I'd rather be painting, but I don't really have anything to paint right now. So I'm going to wrap this up. Those are the business sides of creating a zine. In another video, I will talk about the actual creation of the zine from a writing and creative point of view. All right? So this is Jim, the tabletop engineer. Thanks for joining me as I painted my 2 Byakhee. I'm 1 miniature away from being done with the miniatures I need to start playing this game. So I'm very close, and I can't wait to start playing this game. All right, I'll be back in another video very soon, painting another video. Until then, everybody, take care.